building material giant Holcim has sold its controlling stake, 83.81% in Lafarge Africa, to China's WAPCO Cement Co. In a deal worth over $1 billion. What does this mean for the stock, which has now hit an over 5-year high, as well as its market valuation that has now, in the first week of December, crossed 1 trillion naira? Yes, it's now a stock worth over 1 trillion naira, is what we call it here at Nairametrics. And what can we expect, right? Are we going to see a delisting? Are we going to see its share price double? What is ahead? This is in good company, and of course, we keep hawk eyes on companies listed on the NGX, get through their earnings, get through their financials, their growth prospects, and some of the big deals that they are making, some of the big moves they are making. I'd like to believe you're in good company as well. I am Joanna Mustafa, and with me, of course, is Onome or Hoboriale. I don't know, every time I have you on the show, I try to listen to the voice notes.
You need to pay. Is it that you need to pay or I need to be famous? One of them, that's to solve it.
We can do both. We can do both. But it's great to have you with us, lead analyst at Green Ticker Tales, Onome Hoboriale.
Thank you for having me.
All right, I'm sure you've been following this deal worth over $1 billion within the cement industry here in Nigeria. What are your thoughts on it?
I mean, first is it was kind of expected, because when you look at it, Lafarge is kind of in between the other players in that space in terms of size. So you have Dangote Cement, biggest by capacity. Next, you have BOA. And then you have Lafarge in between. In between in the sense that while Lafarge has spread, in terms of capacity, they are a smaller player compared to the other two. So it was kind of expected. And when you look at the trend with Holcim had been exiting a few markets in Africa. So I think it was only kind of expected at some point in time they would pull the same move in Nigeria.
And I mean, you're talking about trends now. We have been seeing that trends, not just with Holcim, but with European companies and Asian companies that play, right? European countries stepping back from Nigeria, not just Nigeria, Africa as a whole, Asian companies coming in. Earlier this year, we saw Guinness as well, the British multinational, Diageo. They sold their stake, in Guinness to Tolaram, Singaporean, Asian. We've also seen Holcim pull this move in Africa, as you highlighted. So what is it with this trend? What are the Europeans not seeing that the Asians are seeing? What's the incentive here behind this move?
I mean, the dynamics are different. So with Holcim, it's a case of we want to focus on mature markets, or we want to focus on markets that are a bit more developed. With the Guinness and the Asia thing, it was a case of, look, let's just change strategy. And I said the dynamics are different because when you look at the two industries, for the brewers, they have a heavier concentration of FX inputs, right? So with the pounding of the FX rate, the movement in the FX rates, they were hit hard. And it's been a tough few years for brewers in that space. They're all struggling. With cement, it's a bit different because the FX inputs that they have, right, they are far fewer. Where's the FX pressure for them? Energy costs, plant and machinery costs. So I think it was just different dynamics. I don't think it's a case of Africa being a hard place, because even when you look at the new players or the new owners in this case, they're still largely have been in Africa. I mean, Tolaram has been in Africa since God knows when, So it's just different dynamics for the industries.
Agendas as well. And of course, you've also spoken about, I'd like to focus on the should I say, geography of it, the Chinese. What does the entrance of a Chinese company getting majority stake in, one of Nigeria's leading, cement companies, what does this mean for some of the other players as well? Dangote Cement, one of the most valuable stocks, right, on the NGX, one of the most valuable companies, BOA Cement and the likes. What does the entrance of the Chinese, into the cement industry mean?
I mean, I don't think it's early days, right? Would have to see what they do when they eventually take charge. But if you're looking at it from a size perspective, the market is kind of split between, you have the three players. You have Dangote, you have BUA, you have Lafarge. Everybody has their own niche. I don't see Lafarge taking a bigger market share. Because the price, if you look at how price movements are, price determination is between Dangote Cement and to an extent BUA. So Lafarge has been more of a price taker in this space. That's not going to change. And the thing is, while the other players were expanding, Lafarge didn't expand. And you can argue, well, look, you have lots of capacity. Do I need to expand? But the reality is, size helps you play in a market like this. So I don't see any substantial change from that aspect. Now, if it's a case of clients or customers or who are the off-takers of the cement from them, the bulk of cement plays that you have are largely building, private sector, right? That's not changing. Yes, there's been a move to use cement more for road construction.
Right.
So you could argue that, okay, fine, maybe for projects that Chinese construction companies are handling where cement plays a role, you might see them lean more towards Lafarge. But in the midterm, on short to midterm, I don't see much of a change.
So they're not really going to shake up the market?
No.
Really?
I don't expect them to shake up the market.
Okay.
They're too small.
They're too small.
Yes.
And the entrance of the Chinese company with the controlling stake won't make that much of a difference?
I don't think it will, except they decide to expand. Even if you're expanding takes time. So I don't see any major shake-up from them. They're just too small to influence the market that way.
Okay, we will have to see about that. But obviously on the NGX, WAPCO, that's a ticker name for Lafarge. Last year, 2023, we saw a year-to-date gain of about 31%, just over 31%. This year, so far, we're seeing 120% plus, right, already year-to-date gain. What would you say, outside of this deal, we know there has been a lot of buzz outside of this deal, what would you say has been one of the major drivers, for this growth? I mean, in November, before the deal, in the build up to the deal, we had their earnings as well drive buying interest in this particular stock. So, I mean, what would you say have been the major drivers?
I mean, when you look at the three firms, you're looking at 2024 so far. Even though from a size perspective, this size in terms of revenue, size in terms of profit after tax, Dangote Cement obviously is the elephant in the room. Then you have BUA. But from an operational perspective, Lafarge had less cost pressure because they had cleaned up their books a few years ago. They didn't have any FX loans and FX exposures that they were dealing with. Much smaller compared to the other players. So from that angle, you could say that they probably were fitter, if I can use that term. Two is the stock. The stock is cheap, right? Or the stock was cheap. Way cheap compared to other players in that space. I think Dangote Cement had a bit of a run early this year. BUA had its own
the whole sector
time.
as a whole, yes.
Yeah, and generally 2025 has been a good year for stocks. Even when you look at it now, when you work out the numbers, the price at which Holcim is exiting comes about a bit over 100 naira a share. The stock is currently trading around maybe 73, 74 naira a share. So you could argue that there is still some room for move higher than that, at least to hit close to the 100 naira mark.
Than where it's at right now. So you still see headroom for the stock?
Definitely there's still headroom. The only downside is its the float is thin. Holcim has an 83% stake. So it means that when you're looking at free float, how many shares can easily be bought in the market? I mean, prior to the deal, Lafarge was doing barely maybe 100, 200, 300,000 shares. Then after the deal, we started to see 10 million, 15 million. So I think that there's still some room to move. I wouldn't say go in. I think it's a bit too late for anyone who's not in the stock to go in. But for anyone who's in the stock, I think that
Hold.
there's some room. Yeah, I'll definitely
Hold. All right. Well, it hasn't been all roses, right, for the company when it comes to their financials, especially what just came out, the Q3 earnings that we saw. We saw about a 7% dip in pre-tax margin and then an 8% decline in net profit margin. What would you say is triggering all this, and what does this point to ahead?
I mean, you've had higher costs in that space, right? I'm not too bothered about that quarter, and you also take it. There's a geographical factor at play. At least I saw that with Dangote Cement. You had pretty intense rains in that period. So it's also possible that they felt pressure from the angle. So I'm not too bothered by the quarter. When you look at the 9 months, January to September, it's been good. So all in all, I'm not too bothered about the soft numbers, and hopefully Q4 with onset of the dry season and everything, you should see an uptick. So I'm not bothered by that.
Okay, we'll see what happens. I mean, it sounds quite rosy, and obviously you said there's still room for, there's room for growth, a further rally on the stock. But are there any risk factors with this particular stock that investors should be wary of at the moment? Is there anything that makes you raise an eyebrow going through the fundamentals?
I mean, fundamentally, the stock is fine. However, as the notice would say, the transaction is expected to conclude in 2025.
Right.
Even though we tend to take it that it's all well and good, you still need approval from the competition agency. They haven't gotten that yet. So for anyone who's not in, I would say take the typical standard instruction, trade cautiously, right? For anyone who's in, then you don't have anything to worry about. I from the feelers I get, I think the chances of this deal not going through are rather low. I mean, never say never. Nigeria is an interesting place.
Yes,
Anything can happen, but the chances are low. So that's the only caution I have. But fundamentally, in terms of the financial health of the firm, it's fine. It's in a good place. And some people would argue that, look, that stock or the price at which Holcim is exiting probably should have been a bit higher. And so I think if the retail investors, the smaller investors push a bit, you will argue that, look, stock is worth more than what they're going to be offered, but we don't know what they're going to be offered yet. But so from that angle, I'm not bothered. But the usual caution applies. This is a deal in the works. If it's not the time to jump in. If you're already in, then
it's not the time to jump in. Why?
It's not the time to jump in because it's a deal in the works, right? Probability-wise, there's always that 1% probability that the deal won't go through, right? Nothing is 100% in life.
Right.
So from that angle, it isn't the time to jump in. Two is stock isn't very liquid. And when we say liquid simply means the ease at which I can get in and get out, right? I can easily buy or sell.
Right.
So the easier I can do that, the more liquid it is. And the harder it takes, and the more illiquid it is. Stock isn't very liquid. So you don't want to dive into a stock that isn't very liquid. At least prior to now, it wasn't very liquid before the deal was announced. You don't want to dive into a stock. And if there's a delay in the deal, or if there's an extension, or if the deal doesn't pull through your stock, what then do you do? So I'm really one just needs to be cautious if you're not in at this point in time. But if you're in, then you're good.
All right, you're good. And one thing for stocks that are not as liquid, often, the reason some people hold is a dividend, right? Everybody likes a dividend-paying stock. Where does Lafarge, when it comes to where is Lafarge? Where does it lie when it comes to dividend payouts and all that?
I mean, the dividend payout has been pretty good. I think that they would exceed what they paid last year, because if maths serves me correct, earnings probably are upwards 20-30% or so compared to last year. So from a dividend perspective, I think that they would exceed what they paid last year. And fingers crossed, probably because of this deal that's in the works, you want to see that management will want to try and fast forward some of these things. So from that angle, it's fine. But when you look at it, the stock is what? 70 plus naira a share.
Right.
Even if they are doing a between 2 to 3 naira as dividends, when you work out the percentage, that's 3/70. It's rather tiny, So, and for anyone who hasn't been in the market or didn't get into the market early, if you're looking at the dividend yield, right, which is returns in a percentage view, most of it is probably 5-6% because stocks have rallied this year, So if anyone who's looking for a dividend, I don't think this is the time to get into this stock. I think that they will be better off. It's harder now, but they're better off looking for stocks that are slightly cheaper from a dividend perspective because the stock has rallied. Now, if we're looking at it when the stock was a 30, 40 naira and you work out the potential dividend, then that number would make sense. But right now, I don't think it makes sense if your goal is dividend to buy a stock that is doing 70 naira and might pay maybe 3 point something, 2 point something naira as dividend. And more so when you look at where fixed income is.
Yes. It's taking all the shine.
Yeah, so if I can easily do 15%, 20% for a 1 year T-bill, and if dividends are my focus, then really there are very few stocks right now. I don't think there are any from a dividend angle that would give you a 15-20% return right now in Nigeria. So if you're a dividend investor, you probably would be better off pursuing fixed income at the moment.
Okay, fair enough. But there are a lot of people are looking for a lot of incentives when it comes to the equities market now to be in it. You have mentioned, and obviously we're seeing a lot of buy interest when it comes to this particular stock. There are also rising concerns that we may see speculative buying. Do you also share those concerns, and what impact do you think that will have on the stock as a whole?
You're already seeing speculative buying, but the thing about the volumes is it's hard to determine who's the person speculating, because when you have a 10 million shares traded or 50 million shares traded, most of the activity we've seen this year in the market has been domestic, retail and institutional, but domestic. And for the average person, so even if you are doing a 5,000 shares, 10,000 shares, that's what, 350,000, 700,000. I don't think this is the time to get into that stock. Honestly speaking, and just when I look at the market broadly, one of the ways by which or you think that the market is at the top is when you see a lot of penny stocks at gainers. And so if you look at the last 4-5 weeks, without measuring it, I think some of the companies are not worth buying. So when you see stocks with poor fundamentals at the top, it tells you that you are close to a market top. So even if you're a short-term player, I don't think this is the time to get in. Yes, we might see a Christmas rally, but I just don't think this is the time. At best, if you look for stocks that are mispriced, and there are not many of them, but if you see stocks with great fundamentals that are trading at a discount, then maybe one could get it. But it's not the time. I think the time is, the horse has left the stables.
The horse has left its stable. All right. For minority shareholders, after this deal, what do you see, in it for them, and what moves as well ahead?
Will the company be delisted? Very likely. It's very likely.
Very likely. Okay.
Yes, because, what's the incentive to stay listed for them? That's the thing, right? So incentives would differ. Minority shareholders, very likely they would get the same deal, right? Meaning if it's over 100 and something naira a share, then that's typically what they should get offered. By law, once you do a deal like this, then you also have to do an offer to minority shareholders. And so I expect that should happen in due course.
Do you see them pumping the price to, get the best deal?
It's unlikely. It's unlikely. You could argue that if you probably did a maybe 10, 15 year chart of that stock, you can argue that, look, the stock is worth more than what Waxing is buying it for. But I can also argue, because technically speaking, you usually would have a price range. And so you take the price range, you take the time period for a certain price range. I think it's 90 days. And so the highest price point, if memory serves me correct, is a price point at which you can then buy out minority shareholders. But honestly, I think for most minority shareholders, they really have a weak hand. They don't have much of a choice. It's a case of, look, this is what we're going to offer you. Take it or leave it. If you say you're not going to take it, then it's fine. But you don't know how next year would shape out. So really, but I mean, the stock has done over 100% this year. So if you got in sometime in January, I think you've had a good ride,
Right.
And you should cash out and move on to other things.
Oh, now's the time to sell?
Yeah, I mean, because you've done 100%. How much more do you want? You've beaten the index. You've beaten inflation, at least for the year.
Yes.
And so I think you're good to go. Move on to other things. I mean, you can argue, oh, maybe I bought this stock 10 years ago. Or if I bought it at maybe 120 or 130, whatever I'm being offered now is worth less than what the stock is. But that's just the reality of things right now.
So it's a good time to sell, but not a good time to buy.
Yes.
Sounds like what you're saying.
Yes.
Okay. I mean, it's been quite interesting getting insights on this particular, company, WAPCO, as that's the ticker name of Lafarge Africa, with this deal spurring buy interest. Your final thoughts? You've said quite a lot, but your final thoughts on this stock?
It's a good buy.
It's a good buy?
It's a good buy for those who got in. Yeah. If you didn't get in, well, wait for, I don't know. Wait for next year and see how next year turns out.
All right. We'll see what happens next year. Of course, we'll keep our eyes on all of these listed companies on the NGX and provide you all the insights you need. Let us know the moves you'll be making in the comment section, and be sure to like this video as well. Thank you very much, Onome. Okay, say it for the masses.
All
right, thank you very much for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
A pleasure. Lead analyst at Green Ticker. Subscribe, like, share, and see you next time on In Good Company.